Welcome to Crappie Hippies at the Bench, an instructional video series on how to tie your own jigs, flies, and create your own fish-catching baits. Brought to you by Glasswater Angling for a better outdoors, makers of lead-free fishing tackle, inventors of Angle King, the Crappie Dueler, and home to hand-tied jester jigs, Ring King paddle tail grubs, lead-free jig heads, and more. Check us out at glasswaterangling.com. And now here's Crappie Hippie at the Bench. Hey everybody, it's Crappie Hippie, your tree-hugging redneck from eastern Kansas, and I'm back with a video on marabou this time. Now, we've been working with marabou. We all know what marabou is, but people want to know where to get it, where it comes from, what's the deal, and so on. So let's talk about marabou. We'll answer a few questions about this most basic jig tying material. Here we go. All right, now, the vast majority of marabou you're going to buy in the shop or online or wherever is going to be from domestic turkeys. And the big story on that can be found on the Lure Love podcast, Thanksgiving episode. I do a little report on the origins of marabou and the changeover to turkey boo, or marabou off turkeys, from the original source, which is the African Marabou Stork. And it was the original source of marabou. And there are some slight differences between the two feathers, but not a lot. And it's because the stork is a bigger bird, you can get longer fibers off the stork feathers and so on. But the problem with the Marabou Stork is in the 70s it became endangered because of so much exportation of the marabou. Now it's back to a species of least concern because over here in the USA and a lot of other places we switched to turkey feathers, which is way cheaper and way more available. Now, originally they didn't have to breed turkeys for the feathers. Originally just the big, broad, white hybrid turkey had the feathers that could be bleached and dyed and this and that. We had white feathers on a turkey. Was perfect for dyeing because you had the dyes come true, and even you could just do a light bleaching or maybe even no bleaching at all. I'm not an expert on processing feathers. I know they have to be washed and this and that before they can be dyed. And what happens is we wash the feathers once, we send them over to China where they're washed and dried again, and then they're either bleached and dyed, or they go through a process, but then they get dyed and then they get sent back here to be sold by wholesalers. So with all this going on in the world and that kind of thing, there's been some marabou shortages, and we can talk about that a little bit. Okay, well, there might be some shortages out there, but don't despair, because that's one reason I did this video, and we will talk about that here in a second. But let's get the last sort of marabou out of the way. It's called Chickaboo, and there's one company that's selling it right now, and their name escapes me, but you'll find it in the fly shops. It's the softest, has the best action, but because it comes off a bird that's considerably smaller than a turkey, the fibers on it aren't that big, and because it's just kind of getting started in the market and doesn't have big like jig tying applications and big streamer applications, it's not taking off the way the old time marabou or turkey boo is. And you're going to hear me saying turkey boo. That I'm talking about marabou. We still call it marabou even though it comes off a turkey, and that's just well and good. Okay, so marabou comes from a turkey for the most part, and it comes in different kinds, as we will find out here shortly. But let's look at the turkey. Here's my turkey, okay? And marabou is a great feather for insulation. It's a super soft feather, as we well know. And as you see, we've got the boo zone. So it's the belly, the undercarriage, all the way back here to the back, to the vent, or whatever you want to say. It's particularly handy for the hen turkey because she can use it to incubate the eggs and keep the heat on the eggs without crushing them. The feather kind of insulates the eggs from the weight of the bird as well. But of course, male turkeys have marabou on them too because it's an insulation for the bird. And it comes in different styles, and we will talk about the different styles now, or different feather types. Better said. All right. So the first one, and the one that is sought out by jig tiers and fly tiers the most, is what's called blood quill. And the reason it's called blood quill is because it's a feather that's still growing, so there's still a capillary or two under that feather, pumping it with nutrition through the blood and getting it to grow. And here is part of an ounce of blood quill that I got from Nimrod's, my current favorite supplier. And you can see it comes on this string usually. I mean, you can get loose blood quill too, but you can get strung blood quill, and that's what it'll come like. And this is a gorgeous ounce. I've tied a lot of jigs off this, and I still have tons of it. But the thing about blood quill, and we're going to get a piece right here out of the middle, and you see how it has kind of a fan shape to it, okay? And you can see this big thick stem down here, and you can see how supple this quill is in here, because this is a very young feather. This is a feather that was still growing. Okay, so that's down closest to the body of the bird, and it's down lower, and it is what's preferred because they're real uniform. The yield off each quill is really big. You get a lot of density, so you get a lot of feathers per ounce, a lot of usable feathers per ounce. There's less waste, and because they don't have a lot of side filaments. So, and what they do have are very small. So we have a lot of just a straight, nice feather type like this, which is what a lot of folks like to have on their streamers and jigs and other patterns. So this is blood quill. Now, it's going to be more expensive. There's a lot of reasons for that. First of all, whenever you decide, hey, I want to tie with a certain style or a certain type of feather, someone's got to pick that feather out of the bunch. So what happens is when they're pulling the turkey's feathers and they come in these big bins, somebody stands there and sorts out the blood quill, throws that over that way, and throws the other feathers the other way, and they'll actually sort out some different types of feathers as well. So sorted marabou of any kind is going to cost a little extra money, but since blood quill is in such demand both by the fly tyers and the jig tyers and by one other source, the fashion people love this because they can use other types of marabou, but when you're doing a fashion application, when you're doing something fashionable, you want this nice uniform, beautiful, stands up. Look at it waving around. Imagine one of the Rockettes or a Vegas showgirl with this movement in their costume. So we're competing against fashion, but that's where fashion can help us as well, is the fact that you can go to the feather place, or you can go to Zuckerman's, or you can go to any of these feather Schwals. You can go to these feather wholesalers, and they'll let you buy in bulk. Now, be honest, because if you don't have a tax number and all that, you can't get the wholesale prices, but the bulk prices are just as fair, just as fine. And all these feather wholesalers are realizing that it's not just fashion that needs these things. And so they cater very, very enthusiastically to the fishing crowd. So if you can't find it on your online fishing shop like Jan's, Nimrod's, Barlow's, places like that, you can't find what you want because they're out or this or that, be sure to check out feather companies. Just straight up feather companies. Go to their marabou section and put that credit card out of sight, because you will see all kinds of cool feathers for tying jigs, and you'll be tempted to buy the world, and it can get expensive fast buying in bulk. But on the other hand, I've come across some that do little packages for the hobby shop or for the fly shop, whoever, and a lot of them you can still buy the little quarter ounces and so forth. So you're not necessarily stuck with buying a big quantity, an ounce or 4 ounces or something of marabou. So you can still get a lot of different colors, this and that and the other thing. I'll put some links down in the show notes that you can follow to go to a fashion house or to a feather wholesaler or a feather vendor and buy some feathers through them instead of just going through fly tying and jig tying outlets. Oh, and one more thing that makes strung marabou or strung blood quill more expensive is because it's strung. So after somebody sorts out all the blood quill from the big mass of feathers, then somebody else got to take that bin over to the machine and lay all those feathers out on the machine and then run them through the machine that's going to tie them all together, then cut them into the right length to make an ounce and put it in a bag and send it somewhere. Or they send a gigantic, like Nimrod, I'm sure buys it by 1 pound, 5 pound, big long strings, and he cuts them up into your ounces. And he is a very generous person. But he's struggling like everybody else, and so that's why I came here today, to help you find the materials you need and help you identify them so that you know what you're asking for when you go to look. Alrighty, so that covers about all I need to say, I think, about blood quill. And so we're going to get into another sorted or selected marabou, and that's called woolly buggerboo. And buggerboo is of a different sort of texture and feel and so on. And look at this. Okay, I got to looking around on eBay, and I found a feather place out of China that the picture had blood quill laid out, and they wanted $22 for an entire quarter pound of feathers. All right, so that's half price. The shipping was free. Unfortunately, when it came, there was hardly any blood quill in it. For the most part, it was what's called buggerboo, which is this type of insulative feather. And you can see how responsive just the little air that's blowing through my office here is causing this to move around. And you can see the fibers on most of it are rather short. It's a mature feather, okay? But and it's not going to have the pointiness, because when it comes out like this, and then there's what they call barbs, I think is what they're called. But anyway, there's barbs going off this way, and if you put on our microscope, there's even little tiny barbs coming off the barbs. So it has a lot of buoyancy and a lot of movement to it. And what you can do with this is you can tie woolly buggers. You take this off and you do what's called dubbing, and instead of using chenille or something, you can dub in a body, and we will make a video about that. But I really want to talk one of my friends that ties flies into showing you how, because I can do it, but I would rather get the skinny from a person who can just do it in their sleep, like my friend Les, the Professor Klein. But anyway, back to what we're doing here. So this is buggerboo. It's super soft. Can be used for jigs if you don't get too hung up on oh, I gotta have that pointy. It's great for making dubbing. It's great for little accents and so on like that. And you can palmer it, which is palmering is just another way to say winding. And let's say this is your jig, and this is your jig head. So you would take it just like a hackle, and we would turn it over the jig like that. And so we make this cool collar, and then we can tie some more material out back that way. But you're going to see a lot of, especially steelhead, salmon, a lot of collared jigs out there with a palmered marabou feather on it. And it's really, really great. Now I can look through here and find some examples with some longer fibers. And see, there's a blood quill. There's one, or at least it's approaching blood quill zone. But there's one with a little longer fibers. But you can see how they're just a little different. Now, I don't have any trouble tying with this. And I'll tie especially little jigs with it and love every minute of it. It was not what was in the picture. And I didn't want to bash on them. I just said, hey, it wasn't in the picture. I didn't leave them a bad review or anything. Because, you know what? I'm going to have royal blue for a long, long time. This is going to last me. I don't use blue that much. And anyhow, I've got plenty of it here. So it's good enough. Fair enough. All right? Okay. All right. So the next thing we're going to look at is another one that gets selected out, and that's the longer quills. Now, you know, a lot of people call it streamer boo. I don't mind. I think that's a great name for it. But a lot of times, just regular marabou feathers are going to be sold by length. So you can get, 3 and 4 inch, 4 and 5 inch, 5 and 6 inch, 7 to 9 inch even. I mean, there is some big feathers to be had. So you'll end up coming out, these are about 6 inch. And see how they got this really nice long fiber on here for tying the big jigs, for tying the big streamers. And, you can take them and you get that nice, look at this one here. Look at how long and beautiful those are. Now, you can even find these with even longer fibers coming out the side. And, of course, there are some monsters that some companies will select out, so you get the absolute biggest feathers that are available on that turkey. And it's kind of a crying shame, because we've bred that big-shouldered, big-height hybrid turkey so much to create the big breasts that not only can they barely walk around when they're ready to be slaughtered, but the feathers have gotten too brittle. So there is a turkey they still use for meat, but they've had to kind of separate the breed over here to be more about feathers. And because they've created these mutant, giant-breasted, insane turkeys, man-made turkeys, the feathers have gotten so brittle and so weird on them, and they can't just use, like the common turkey feather like they used to be able to. When you listen to that story on Lure Love, you'll find out that the switch to turkey feathers occurred back in the 40s. And it was just the ordinary white hybrid we used then. But now they've had to be separated out. Okay. But I digress. Let's get back to these streamers. So we've got some big turkeys being bred for the fibers. And so you can get bigger fibers in the streamer marabou. Now, this is not going to be as expensive as your selected blood quill, but these are still selected, so they're going to be a little more, because anytime, whether it's sorting out marabou to get your buggerboo over here and your big streamer boo over there and your blood quills over there, this takes time. It takes labor. It takes people, and that costs money. So things, you know, selected marabou is going to be a little more. Now, of the selected marabou, the very cheapest you can get, and it's a lot of fun, and this is an old package that Kathy gave me from her when she used to do the costumes and the little setups for the photography studio and the little crowns for the kids to wear and the little headdresses and the princess ballerina and all that sort of thing. Anyway, she gave me this nice bag of this crazy cool color of turkey flats. And turkey flats are a feather like this. And you can see we got some wonderful pointy material up here. We got some soft kind of bugger material down in here. And then we've got just a standard webby secondary feather of some sort type. If you're into feathers and I'm saying the wrong thing, I apologize. Please straighten me out. But we've got this type of feather, which a lot of fly tyers like these, because they can take this up here and make wings and other parts. They can make that, like when they're tying a nymph or something and they want it like a little hard insect shell, they can take a piece of this, tie it here, put it over, you know, and so they've got kind of a cool looking body on their nymph or what have you. And then they have all this down in here for feelers, for dubbing, for whatever they want, or for tying little mini jigs, little micro jigs, and so on. I mean, really, where does a nymph with a 60-degree jig head leave off and call it a nymph, and then one with a 90-degree jig head, you know, or hook, or however you want to say it? So a 90-degree hook is a jig, but we take it out to 60 degrees or 45 degrees, and all of a sudden it's a nymph. It's like, you know, are they all jigs? Are they all nymphs? Are we going to argue about it? Let's not argue. Let's just say, if you're fishing with an ultralight, it's a jig. If you're fishing with a 60-degree jig on your bait caster for bass and it weighs, you know, a ½ ounce, that's a jig, all right? But if you're a fly caster and you got that 60-degree nymph and you want to call it a check nymph, be my guest, gosh darn it, you know, because what the heck, who cares? We know what we're talking about, we know what we're doing, and we can use turkey flats in the construction of both those lures. So that is your cheapest select, and you can find these at the hobby store, and these are used in fashion to make the cheaper boas and to make some of the different, you know, costumes and so on. But they're not as in demand. Nothing is as in demand as blood quill. So turkey flats, there you go. That's the last sort of selected marabou. Okay, so now I'm going to show you something. This is going to help you get around. So if you can't find blood quill in the color you want, or you just can't find it at all, or you can't find it in the size package you want, or whatever, there's Unsorted, okay? There's just general good old marabou. And like, here we go. I got this bag of beautiful canary yellow. I just love this. I used to almost exclusively tie in fluorescent yellow, and I do have a bag of that, or what, you know, people call that fluorescent yellow, or is it yellow chartreuse? I don't know. And of course this color can be lighter sometimes as well. But people up north where there are a lot of yellow perch and stuff want this straight yellow. And back when I was a kid, we only had 3 types of marabou in the kit: white, yellow, like this kind of yellow, and black. And that's what we tied all our jigs with. But what I got here is an unsorted bag of marabou from Jan's Netcraft. I think it cost me $4.50. I know it was less than $5. Alrighty, so this is going to have all kinds of stuff in it. Alright, so let's pull some out here. Well, here we go, right off. Look at this. We've got a flat. Alright, and that's a real nice flat. Look at how long those fibers are on that sucker. It's a good one. And then here we got a piece of streamer boo. Look how long those fibers are on that. Okay, so we got a piece of streamer boo in there. And then here we go. This is kind of a bugger boo. It's a big mature feather. It's a little stiff, so if you were going to wrap it, you would only be able to use about this much of it. Because when it gets so stiff down here, you either got to take a razor blade and trim some of this off to make it more supple. But that's an awful long boo to make into a collar. That's going to make you a big collar. But you can see you could tie little yellow jigs with this, or you can just strip this off and use it for dubbing. There's all kinds of things. But so it's got a pieces that are kind of, and then there, what is that in between? Up here is, you get into some streamer country down in here. We got buggerboo. So we've got a lot of things coming off different quills. Now, I'm going to search around. Let me search around. Am I going to get lucky? Have they separated out? You know, there's another little flat. That's nice and cute. But have they separated all the blood quills out of here? They may have. Okay, I had to search around in here for quite a while, but I did I did find a piece of blood quill. So those sorting people, yeah, they don't get paid to get these out of there. Okay, so they don't miss too many. But you can see how it's different. It's got this fan shape, got this big thick quill stem on it that was still, the capillary was still up in there feeding the feather. And so occasionally you'll come across some blood quill even in an unsorted. But in the meantime, enjoy all these. Look at this. This was a piece of blood quill. It was almost finished. It was just, and it turned into this big, mature kind of, still got real supple up here. It was still growing a little bit when they harvested this one. So you get all kinds of wonderful feathers out of these. And when you buy like this, you can get so many more colors because you're not, and you get a huge amount. So you can go buy a 1/4 ounce somewhere for $3.50, or you can hunt around and buy this for $4 or $5 and get an entire ounce, 4 bags, for the same price. Okay, so, you know, you can buy your boo by type because you know what job you're going to do. You know what you want it to do for you. And if you want to be like Kim Burnett of Crappie Stopper Jigs and Flies, then you're going to want to pay the extra money. Because now this is a beautiful ounce. This costs $10 from Nimrod. This costs $4.55 from Jan's. This and this weigh the same amount. It's kind of like when you were a kid in science class and they had the upright flask and the beaker, and they're like, which has more water? They're the same. This is just fluffed out in a big bag like this. This is all strung up nice and tight and efficient like this. So this costs twice as much as this. So all I'm trying to say here is, if you know, I understand wanting this, but if you're going to different websites and you're finding they're out of your colors or out of this, they're out of that in the blood quill, then do not be afraid to turn around and find some unsorted, okay? Because you'll be able to tie your, you know, especially if you're tying for fun and you tie some streamers, or you tie some big jigs, or you tie some small jigs, or you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. You'll find every feather you need for doing, you know, experimenting with buggers, or with making big streamers, or with just tying your regular jigs. You're going to have plenty of fun with these. And if you're on a budget, you can get twice as much of this as you can of this, so for the same money. So consider this stuff. Look around for it if you're having trouble. So let's go through this real quick. The fanciest, most expensive, your blood quill. All right. Then your next fanciest is your bugaboo. And then about the same price, and sometimes more if you really get the big long select ones, are your selected out 5 and 6 inch and up streamer feathers. And finally, your last select marabou is flats, and these are handy and easy to find and not that much. And then generally your least expensive marabou is the unsorted marabou like this. So look around at the tackle places, at the online outlets like Jan's, like Barlow's, and so on. But don't forget to go to the feather place, or Zuckerman's, or Schwals, or any of these other places that are just feather sellers to both fashion and to fishers, to find another source of marabou. All right. All right, so eventually what's going to happen is you're going to, you know, decide, I want my jigs to look this way or that way. Maybe. I don't know. You know, I tie a little bit of everything. I love having unsorted marabou. I love my blood quill. When I have to tie a lot of the same jig, when I have to tie 3 dozen of the same pattern, there's nothing like having a strung quill, blood quill, because it's quick, it's uniform, it's all this stuff. Helps me tie quickly, helps me tie efficiently, so it's worth the extra money. But I am just thrilled to have my bugaboo. I don't necessarily need a whole 1/4 pound of royal blue, but one of these days maybe I'll be so glad I bought it I won't be able to look sideways. But anyway, that's the trip on marabou. That's where it comes from. There's some alternative sources for getting it. Those are the different types, so you can look around when they don't have your color in one type or what you want in one type. Maybe we can patch through this whole pandemic mess and get it done with some other kind. But anyway, enjoy the marabou. I hope you enjoyed the video. I sure enjoyed making it for you. This is Crappie Hippie, your tree-hugging redneck from eastern Kansas, saying tight lines and Valentines. Peace out.